And welcome again to the Sunday Talk at the Nine-Sided Circle. I am your host, Mushtaq Ali Al-Ansari, and let me find her here. There she is. This is your co-host, Kyle.
Doing my usual thing.
Doing your usual thing of making everything work behind the scenes. So we are bringing this to you both from Oakland, California and from Hollyweird, California.
Yes, indeed. Hollyweird.
Yes.
Can vouch.
It's a fun place. More fun than Disneyland in some ways. Get out on the boulevard, do the walk of the stars, get hassled by the Scientologists, and
hang out with Marilyn.
Yeah. All that stuff. See if you can walk your dog and get him to relieve himself on the Trump star. Did I say that out loud? Sometimes I am not a very nice person. So tonight we are going to be talking about the fourth precept of the Khwajagan, of the teachers or the masters, as some like to call them. This is the precept in Arabic. That's who we're missing. Speaking of Arabic, we don't have Ahmed and Reina are not on. God, who is going to correct my pronunciation for me? Damn. So in Arabic, we call this Khalwat Dar Anjuman. And it's usually translated as solitude in the crowd. The standard meaning is to be inwardly with God while outwardly with people. And that's a perfectly good translation. We shouldn't waste it. But we can look a little bit deeper. Khalwat is a Sufi technical term for a specific kind of retreat, often for 40 days. And those of you who were in the Three Forces and Six whatever they were, probably remember me talking about a book by Ibn al-Arabi. In English, they call it Journey to the Lord of Power, which is a manual on retreat, amongst other things. And in traditional retreat, you do several things. You do prayer, you do remembrance, you do meditation, you do contemplation, you do taking account, you do fasting, you do recitations, and then whatever else the teacher might prescribe. And it's an idea of withdrawing from the world so that you have time and space to do your inner work uninterrupted. So, if we look at the work at the roots, now I'm always talking about the roots of these Arabic words, and the reason is that all classical Arabic words come from what are called triliteral roots. Three letters, which are consonants, three consonants, or long vowels in a couple of cases, that are fit together, and each of them is a verb. So in Arabic, everything starts with action. All things are created from actions. It's an interesting concept. It's also true in classical Hebrew and in Aramaic. So the Semitic languages structure themselves in this way. So when we look up a word in Arabic in an Arabic dictionary, we don't look up the word itself, we look up its root. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if I look up, for instance, the word Islam in an Arabic dictionary, I don't look up Islam, I look up Salama. That's the root. S-L-M, which we pronounce as Salama, which means peace. The act of being at peace. And so all Arabic words start that way. And to really understand them, you have to look at the root that they come from and how they're derived. So, Khalwat comes from the root Khe, Lam, Wow. And the meaning of that root is to be empty, vacant, void. That's the first iteration. The second group of meanings has to do with isolation and vacuum and empty places. The third iterations of the word have to do with being solitary, lonely, and isolated. So that in itself is interesting, but as one of my first teachers told me, always look for the puns. And Arabic is a great language for making puns with. So instead of going Khe, Lam, Wow, you go Khe, Lam, Te, because the word is Khawat. You just replace the W part for a T part. And then you get a totally different meaning. Khalt, that way means to mix, to mingle, to blend, to confuse, to mix up. The second group of meanings means to fuse or merge together. The third group means to mingle with a crowd, to associate with people. And the fourth group means to consist of a heterogeneous mix. So with a simple pun, you get these diametrically opposed meanings to the same word sound. You look at it one way, it's like one of those pictures, and you look at it one way and it's a young woman, and you look at it another way and it's the old woman. It's the same thing. If you look at this word one way, it means isolation and retreat. If you look at it the other way, it means being with people, being connected. So you have that. And then there's some interesting stuff in those two meanings. Now, Anjuman comes from the root Jim, Mim, Mim, J-M-M. The first meaning of that root is to gather, to collect one's thought or to concentrate. The second meanings that you derive from that root are abundant, much, crowd. A third derivation from the root has to do with rest and relaxation and gathering one's strength. A final meaning for the word is istjaman, which means collectedness, concentration, attentiveness. So you have those concepts, and you notice that it actually makes a sort of affirming, denying, reconciling thing there. If you look at it in a particular way. And so you have the one concept of withdrawal, of isolation, and the other concept of being immersed in the crowd, being completely engaged. And I have a quote here from a great sheikh. One sheikh, when asked about Khalwat Dar Anjuman, said, "This is man's work. It is not for the immature, not for children. The real work of the soul starts here, and most people never get to the point where they can bear it. One must first master the breath, have an idea of their real goal, and be able to hold their intention if they expect to find solitude in the crowd. Now, that was the quote I was trying to remember last week when I was talking about the journey to the homeland, because you'll notice that the three things that this guy mentioned were the first three precepts that we touched on before we get here. And so this is the idea of, this is where the real work starts. So the teachers of the path say that one of the things that this means is to be fully engaged in life, to work in the world, to get married, to have children, to do all of these things, raise a family, be a viable member of your community, everything that is involved in being in the world. And at the same time, to be constantly in an inward state of retreat from that. So the old concept of being in the world but not of the world is a little bit like that. So is this kind of making sense so far?
Yeah.
Good. Any questions? All right, so continuing on. I have on my note here, one thing that should be understood at this point. Each of the aphorisms represents not just a good idea or a bit of advice, but a specific practice. These practices have fallen by the wayside in most Sufi orders today, that I'm familiar with at least, and but are still known to be practiced in very rarefied circles. The groups who have managed to keep these practices have done so by completely avoiding political notice and by doing Khalwat Dar Anjuman, by being in the crowd but invisible at the same time. So how do you do solitude in the crowd? He asked rhetorically. First, you start by doing solitude. Not for long times, but ideally, maybe once a day, you take an hour to be in retreat. And this should ideally happen early in the day or late at night. And in that retreat, you practice your breath practice. You practice your, what they call meditation. You practice the kind of work that should be done in retreat. One of those is a form of, it's called taking account. Taking account is where you look at your actions throughout, like for instance, the previous day, and do a ruthless assessment of whether or not each action that you took brought you closer to your goal, took you further away from your goal, or had no meaning one way or the other. And then after you do that, after you have done your breath work and your meditation, after you have taken account, you set your intentions for the day within the retreat. And then you don't quit the retreat. You take the retreat with you into the world. And so that means at various times in the day, while you are doing other things, you also go into your breath practice. And if you're a full-blown Sufi type, your breath practice includes what we call zikr. And zikr, it literally means remembrance. And so it is the practice of self-remembering. Muslim Sufis do it with the names of God. You don't have to. Anything can be remembered. As I was explaining to one of my favorite students a week or so ago when they were having a very hard time, I was doing the zikr of them to help them go through the hard time. Don't know if it worked. It's not my job to figure that stuff out. But it is a thing. So you can do the remembrance of anything. So the remembrance of self is to remember not the ego self, but that which is behind the ego self that remains awake when when its attention is looking out at the world, when it is the seer, the witness. So that's the part of you that you remember throughout the day in order to maintain your retreat while working fully in the world. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Thoughts? Yes, Nancy.
Oh, no, I was leaning forward to read the chat.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's okay. God, where is Ilmar when I need him?
Yeah.
It's not a question to say, but I'm a little bit confused by everything that just happened.
Okay. How can I unconfuse you or confuse you more, whichever comes first?
Probably the second one. So we're like starting your day, for example, with this retreat, this practice, this time with yourself.
Yes.
I think I got lost in the remembering of other things than aren't self, the zikr stuff.
Let's try that again. You got lost at doing the zikr part?
Yeah.
Okay, so my recommendation is that you do the remembrance of your it's weird because we have the same word for both things. You know, you have the ego self and then you have the self-self. Remembrance of the soul, remembrance of that which looks out from your eyes when all of the noise has stopped. Now, I'm being very general with this because for each of you who's listening, it's going to be different. And traditionally, the only way that you can get your absolute correct practice is on a one-on-one work with a teacher, which doesn't have to be me. You could find other teachers that could do this for you too. So this is not a commercial for you to come and talk with me, though you could do that. And I would probably help you find your zikr if you really wanted one. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. Using that practice throughout the day is extremely important to pulling you back from over-identification with the world, because the last thing in the world you want to do is take the world seriously. If you take the world seriously, the next thing you know, you've joined a political party and you've got signs for candidates on your lawn. And if your candidate doesn't get elected, the world comes to an end and all of this kind of stuff. Who needs that kind of tribulation in your life? You can still vote for the candidates. You can still support them, but don't take it seriously. meaning don't become identified with the role that you're playing. That's the bottom line. Do not become identified with the role that you're playing. Realize that when you're out in the world, you have roles to play. You can be a husband, a wife, a mother, a father, a grandfather, a grandmother, a disreputable aunt or uncle. You can be a teacher, you can be a student. You have all of these roles, and you need to be able to put them on and take them off like a mask while keeping the essential self awake under them. And that is solitude in the crowd. And maintaining your connection to essence. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Good. What else am I missing here? I know I'm missing a lot. Don't mind me, I'm just looking for my other notes. And I have no idea where they are.
Anything I would have or no?
Nope.
Okay.
This is in the special super secret book that you have not been entrusted with yet. Don't worry, you're almost worthy. You collect a few more stamps and you'll have it.
I better get cracking. Get those stamps.
Yeah, and remember, Sufis use green stamps.
Yep.
Oh, good Lord.
Two of you remember green stamps, I see, by the shaking of the head. And maybe at least one of the two of you get the pun because Sufis love the color green.
Mm-hmm.
I got that. I did.
Yes. Yeah. So, sorry. Okay, so.
Now remember, this is super secret stuff.
This is, in fact, super secret stuff, especially about the green stamps. Don't tell anybody.
Okay.
All right, so. Another important part of retreat, of the Khalwat part of Khalwat, is fasting. Now, you can fast from food, and that is highly recommended. All of the great masters of yore who lived to be, in their 90s and 100s back in the Middle Ages, when, the average lifespan was in, maybe 30 years, they all recommended fasting as a way to maintain your health. But fasting can be the withholding of any number of things. So you can fast from food. You can fast from speech. You can fast from a particular emotion. That's a hard one because it means that you must be constantly vigilant to make sure that that emotion does not creep in. And let me tell you, the moment you decide to fast from an emotion, it will show up. It will seek every opportunity to break your fast for you. So as part of the Khalwat part of the solitude in the crowd, you fast from various things while still being in the world. So you fast from eating, and not for very long. The preferred fast is only from sunrise to sunset, not for 24 or 48 or more hours, just sunrise to sunset. So from sunrise to sunset, you might decide, today I am not going to use anything that society considers to be a swear word, God damn it. and see what happens. The thing about fasting is that it keeps you awake. So you have to have a bit of attention out there all the time to make sure that you don't unconsciously break your fast. You can fast, this is one of my favorites, fast from driving a car or riding in a conveyance one day. Get everywhere you're going by walking. That will give you a certain sense of reality. So your fasting goes on throughout the day as you completely engage in life. So here's a question. What would any of you like to fast from for a day, from sunrise to sunset?
Technology. Digital technology.
Okay, that's a really good one. Lock your phone away for a day. Oh, Vivian, music. That's rough. I would find that a very, very hard fast.
Mm.
Words over 3 syllables. That would be good to do that. And then the next day fast from words under 3 syllables.
Mm.
Oh, that's impossible.
I was wondering if
I differ with you. You get to use I and you. You get to use those little things. But for the regular words, I'm sure it can be done. One of my favorite linguistic fasts is to fast from the is of identity.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Try fasting from the is of identity for a day. That means the is of identity is A is B. I am hungry. That's the is of identity. That is me creating the identity of hunger. I am a teacher. No, I'm not a teacher. I do some teaching from time to time. I am not hungry. Occasionally, my body experiences hunger. You will find with a little practice that you can go an entire day without using the is of identity to yourself or anyone else. And if you do it elegantly, they'll never catch on. At first, your speech might seem a little bit stilted. But there's actually an experimental language called E prime, which is English without the is of identity, that some very smart people put together some years ago. And this is what led me to the idea of the identity fast. And so I'm going to encourage you all to think about that one, because that will teach you things about yourself. Okay. What else could you fast from? Self-improvement. I think that is actually a brilliant idea, because constant self-improvement can be wearing.
True. Self-condemnation. Yeah, I was just going to say negative self-talk. That was going to be my thread right there. Yep. Aaron mentioned anything but water to drink. Yeah. Or reading. You want to abstain from reading, Aaron?
That would be rough too.
I don't know how I would do that.
Yeah, you'd have to like stare at the walls.
Yeah, it does sound challenging, yeah.
All right, so you have that. So far we have the morning retreat, which can last anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour, depending on what you have. You can do a 10-minute retreat. You might have to like lock yourself in the bathroom. And in Mark's case, have 3 women pounding on the door going, "Let me in, I have to put on my makeup." Within the retreat, you have the working of remembrance. And then you have the concept of fasting throughout the day as one of your intentions. And that is an exercise that is just designed to help you be present. I hear the keyboard going there.
Yeah, sorry, that's me.
No, that's good. That means that I've actually said something worth writing down.
Well, I want to make sure that we get a good list of like what this entails.
All right, so the next part of retreat is purification. And fasting is part of purification. The other part of purification is breaking a sweat. Now, you can take the lazy man's way, and this is a way I prefer quite often, and do a sauna. Saunas are nice. Or you can do some form of physical exercise as a sacrifice. Sacrifice comes from the same word as sacred, same root as sacred, and it means something which is set aside for the deity. So when you sacrifice, you are setting something aside, in this case, for your essence. So to sacrifice for the essence, or sacrifice to the essence, in this sense would be to do some form of physical activity consciously to the point where if you go on a bike ride and you get really sweaty, the intention might lead to massively different results. But you can go on a bike ride as a sacrifice. And that means you go on it alone. You go on it with minimal gear, just enough water to get you there and back and no more. And you don't do things like wearing headphones. And you remain aware of your environment the entire time that you're out on the bike ride. When I had access to better trails, that was a thing that I tried to do at least 3 times a week. Here is not quite as good.
So this sacrifice, is that physical activity? Like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
purification sacrifice. How do those? Are they
a sacrifice? A sacrifice is anything that you set aside for the ultimate reality. So working in any form can be sacrifice. If you set that aside as an offering to your essence, is a way to think about it.
So this is different from the purification, though?
This is part of purification.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry for being vague.
Sorry.
As they used to say, it was clear as mud, but it covered the ground. If the exercise is good for you, does that count as sacrifice? Yes, of course it counts as sacrifice. As a matter of fact, you do not want to do an exercise that is not good for you. Damaging your body is not true sacrifice. Unless perhaps you are a Plains Indian doing the sun dance, then that's their thing. Nobody here is Lakota or Arapaho or Cheyenne or Kiowa or anything like that. So you don't have a Sundance tradition where you pierce your chest and hang from the Sundance tree. Doing exercise that hurts you is just not terribly smart. Don't do it. Probably the main key to all of this is to avoid distraction with what you're doing. So if you are doing a sauna, again, don't listen to a book or music in the sauna. Sit there, do your breath work. How about swimming? I tell you what, Will, give it a try and come back and tell me how it works. I grew up in the damn desert. I don't do swimming. Swimming is an alien concept.
Yeah, I have a nice pool just down the road now, so I will give that a go.
There you go. Yeah, go see if that works. Dedicate your swim to your essence. I'm downright fremen about the idea of immersing your body in water. It seems sacrilegious to me.
So baths, are they not a thing?
Baths are not a thing. Baths are definitely not a thing. When I was a kid, we didn't have indoor plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
And so a bath consisted of a galvanized tub filled with hopefully warm water out in the backyard. And I never found it a pleasant experience. So when we finally got running water to the place and we had a shower, I never took another bath.
Mark says you were in water for 9 months before you were born.
How do you know?
Nick says,
Out of the ground.
what's that, Will?
I was just asking if Mushtaq sprouted out of the ground like a tree.
Well, you know, they call her Mother Earth, not Mother Water. Ah, Sean! Sean has arrived. Yes, Aaron, and we don't want the flux. Actually, the flux is an archaic term for diarrhea. So,
Ooh.
yeah.
Hi, Sean.
Hello, Sean. And
Nick
asked, could the purification ritual be part of the hour retreat? Sure, why not? There are set rules to this, but there aren't that many. And the only important thing is that you are inwardly awake to reality while outwardly engaged in the world. That's the rule of solitude in the crowd.
Can you repeat that?
You are inwardly
Mm-hmm.
with reality while outwardly engaged in the world. So that's pretty much it. The floor is now officially open for questions. Turn on your mics or type something and let's discuss this. Does this have any meaning to you? Is it something that could become useful in your life? Is it a nice story? Tell me, I want to know.
I feel that it, at least to me personally, fits really well with a lot of the stuff I was talking to you about the other day, Mushtaq, on intention and being kind of clear on my intention and keeping that throughout the day.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
Sounds like a lot of, I guess, like tools and almost like a basket to hold that concept in throughout the day.
Yep. Here's somebody else typing. There could be a question coming up.
Mushtaq,
Yes.
I used to do a number of practices and try to be quite disciplined with time set aside during the day to become more grounded, more present, and experienced quite a bit of frustration in that it felt like it was contrived in some ways. And I was reminded that there's a saying, my life is my prayer. That sense that setting aside time seems to be removing myself from the flow. So I just try to do all those things that you mentioned as part of the flow of my day rather than setting time aside. And for myself, I find that to be more flow.
Well,
so
that strikes me as kind of ideal, actually. I would say that is in some way a higher order of what we're talking about, because that's what you want to get to do what you do throughout the day as you are living your life. The stuff that I mentioned, like setting aside a little time in the morning or late at night before you go to bed, is to give people a jump start to do this. You've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time now. You have some practice under your belt. And for people who are not as practiced in this kind of work, it's good to have something that they can do to literally set aside a little time to remind them to keep that awareness during the day. The basic rule, though, is if it is working for you, keep doing it.
Yeah, I would distract myself during the day thinking about what I was going to be doing later as a practice. Only to realize, that doesn't seem to be, it's like, oh, I can just go about my day, willy-nilly and all over the place because I know at 9 o'clock tonight I'm going to meditate or something.
Yeah.
So I kind of confused myself, or I gave myself reasons not to do it other than those times. And so I just decided I'm just going to try to do it daily.
Yep, and I would encourage everybody to do exactly that. And if you have trouble doing exactly that, then there are these little tricks that begin to train you to do exactly that. But what Mark is describing is the ideal outcome of this practice.
Yeah, what that meant is I had to sit through a number of experiences and be present to them that I wasn't before.
Yep.
Especially the ones I designated as uncomfortable or undesirable. So I just decided instead, well, I'm just going to try to sit with this and breathe through this one.
Yep. That works for all of those times when you are not fasting from uncomfortable experiences. Bada boom. Let me see. From Nancy, it could be useful for me. I feel like I don't really connect with people, and maybe feeling like I'm not supposed to lose myself could help. Yes, and you're not supposed to lose yourself. You are supposed to be present, and you can't be present after you've lost yourself. So I would be very interested, if you do try this, to hear how the results go for you.
Okay.
Yeah, so keep me appraised. Send me postcards from reality. Other thoughts?
Aaron said, the idea of exercise as a sacrifice to one's essence seems really useful.
Yeah, I really like it. It helps in those times when I know I need to go out and exercise, and I don't feel like it. I go, okay, I can make the sacrifice and get out and exercise.
I'm still laughing at Aaron's comment about baths. Lord.
Well, any more thoughts? This, in some ways, is the... Yes, Aaron, you do have an odd sense of humor, which I suspect is why you fit in here so well.
I'm gonna say, yeah.
Yes, we are the weird.
All right. Will says he wouldn't mind hearing a few more ideas for fasting.
You know, there's a really hard one, which is fasting from objects of desire.
Say a little more about that.
This is one when I have younger male students, particularly in their 20s or 30s, I often give them this as a task. Because, of course, if you are in your 20s, what is the main object of desire for you?
Chicks, man.
Yeah, or if you're gay, guys, you know,
yeah,
or
exactly.
the people who you are attracted to, and pizza, yes. So fasting from objects of desire is to spend a day not allowing yourself to fall into that. That means you're walking down the street, if you're a young guy like Will and you see a beautiful woman, you do not allow yourself to be drawn to that. You only allow yourself to see a human being, not an object of desire.
Is this
Now,
metaphor? Lowering the gaze, as it were.
Yeah, it is metaphorically lowering the gaze. You know, and you know, at my age, it's not that hard. At Will's age, it would be maddening.
We have an affirmative on that. Yeah.
Yes. So anything that provides that kind of irritant. Good night, Nick. Sleep well. Try and stay warm.
Yeah. Stay cozy. We'll see you next week.
So I'm going to leave you. Now here's the secret story. Now that Nick is gone, I can tell you this. Not really. So there is. Where did Kyle go? Kyle, where did you go? There you are.
I'm still here, yeah.
Yeah, you disappeared for a second there.
That was strange.
So I mentioned this briefly before. There's a truck doing something obscene in front of my house from the sound of it.
I'm just going to read Nancy's remark real quick because I think it's
yes, please.
important. Yeah. Nancy says, Thorn Coyle has mentioned fasting from whatever makes you feel as though everything is all right. As I recall, this is only to be given up for short periods.
Yeah, Thorn is a very, very, very smart woman. And I highly recommend listening to her when she says things like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's a brilliant thing to do. And let me give you the ultimate metaphor for the fast. And I've talked about this before. The real reason that God kicked Lucifer out of heaven. So, Lucifer, the angel of light, was God's favorite. Right?
I'm just going to mute everyone for a minute.
Okay.
There we go.
So, Lucifer was God's favorite angel, his favorite amongst all creation. And God loved Lucifer above all of the other angels. And Lucifer loved God above all of the other, above everything else, totally devoted. This is a little bit different than how you get it in Genesis, so bear with me. So, God makes creation, and he finds himself slipping into the sleep of creation. Even God can become identified with the objects given to his consciousness. And so he says to himself, I need something that will constantly remind me to stay awake. And he hits upon a plan, and it's a plan that is so effective that even to contemplate it makes God weep. But he carries it out anyway, and he creates man. And he calls all of the angels together, and he says, bow down before my creation. And all of the angels, being, good yes men, bow down, except for Lucifer, who says, Lord, I cannot bow down before anyone or anything but you. And so God casts him out of heaven for disobedience. But what he actually did was cast him out so that he would constantly, in every second, feel the lack of his most beloved son. And that became the irritant that kept him awake. And of course, Lucifer, being cast out from that which he loved the most, constantly felt that irritant, and it kept him awake. So that's a different spin on the whole Lucifer thing. And every time you do a fast, you're doing something like that. You are setting aside something that is meaningful for you so that you can feel the irritation of its lack and allow that irritation to be the energy, because all irritation is friction and all friction is energy, and the energy will keep you awake. Or so they say. I'm sure it's just a story. But again, Sufis tend to like the concept of Lucifer as the being that was willing to give everything up so that he could remain focused on the one reality. It's a thought. Not that I'm recommending that anybody do that, but do the little fast. Give up cookies for a day. That's often, yeah.
My struggle is real.
Yes. Sugar, more addictive than heroin.
Yep, it's terrible.
All right. Any last questions before we wrap it up for the night? Will asks, would you recommend having a fast every day? Not at first. One of the first things that you learn to fast from is excessiveness.
Yeah.
Never do anything to excess. So I would recommend doing a fast once a week, and then twice a week, and then maybe 3 days a week. I do fasts every day after years and years and years of doing this, but I had to work my way up to it. And even I, great and august and enlightened being that I am, he said with an almost straight face, even with all that practice, I fast from fasting every now and again just to relax from it. And this is the practice of fasting is one that I have done since 1975? Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
Mark asks, back to your initial comment that solitude is where the real work starts. Is this the movement across the equator from 4 to 5 on the Enneagram?
Yes. It in fact is, because at 4 is the honeymoon. You never fast on your honeymoon, right? The honeymoon is where the good stuff happens. And then you have to get down and do the work. And that's definitely crossing the equator from 4 to 5. So bingo on that one. Good catch, Mark. Any other last questions? I can entertain last questions for hours, so keep it coming.
And you can always, turn on your mics if you don't want to type it out too.
All right. Then we are going to call it an evening, and I will shut off the recording and say thank you very much for coming. And if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this. So you get all the credit. And we will hopefully see you next week.